Tonight, we're going to talk about the missing middle. We're going to ask ourselves two important questions. What is it? And then why should we bring it back? And how do we go about doing that? One of the things that has been mulling around in my brain for the last little while has been the idea of the grand bargain. This is a term popularized by an urban geographer named Gordon Price, who said the grand bargain was an agreement in the post-war era to allow for high-rise density in very small pockets, along with low-scale suburbia everywhere else with little in between. Massive change for one area, almost none for the other, and in a technical term, spot rezonings thereafter. And you can see what that looks like. But in fact, in many of our cities and communities, you need only look out the window or look over a little distance and you will see what this looks like. This is in North York in Ontario, but it looks like it could be so many other places in North America. Tall and sprawl with very little in between. This has given rise to the introduction of the concept of the missing middle. The missing middle is about a range of housing types that help meet the growing demand for walkable urban living. That is a range of housing types. And you'll see that displayed here from duplexes all the way up to live works, townhouses, cottage courts, courtyard buildings, many of these things that are missing in most of our neighborhoods. And the reality that we face is that it is missing because there are a lot of barriers in place for these housing types to be built. There are restrictive, or shall I say, exclusionary zoning rules that limit where multi-unit residences can be built. Those residences right in the core here. Residences that provide places for people to have an in-law live with them. Places for people to gather together a few different groups or people in a household and create a co-housing space. Co-ops and many other forms like that are not allowed to be built in the vast majority of the residential lands in many of our cities and even in most of our small towns. And the consequence of this has been that there is a major barrier and a major barricade, and it's one of the key reasons why the missing middle is missing. We permit large-scale projects, we permit single-family homes to be built en masse, and yet these key pieces that have always existed in traditional cities, in traditional developments, multi-unit homes as we like to call them, are functionally ruled out in so many places. And even as cities recognize their value now, are still standing in the way of seeing those things brought to market. There are also many cultural assumptions about who lives in these housing types. Assumptions that have been long ago dispelled, and yet the prejudice and the bias lives on. The idea that an apartment is for low-income people, or that an apartment is a generator of crime, or that an apartment is a place that anyone worth their salt wouldn't want to live in. And we know that those are dangerous, harmful, and quite plainly wrong assumptions. That there is nothing sacred about the single detached home. Neither is there anything remarkable about the high-rise condo, but that we should have this mix, and we need this mix in order to solve the housing crisis that we are in. Another red flag, and if we investigate how the missing middle died, another red flag would be if you go and look at your city's parking requirements. We touched on zoning requirements, but the city's parking requirements have also caused the death of so many missing middle projects that would perhaps otherwise been built. Think of the ways in which the requirement of more than one space of car parking per unit causes buildings to be either inflated or deflated. That is, in order to justify the cost of underground parking or at-grade parking, a building must be inflated, made much larger than it otherwise would be in order to accommodate first several layers of parking, followed by layers of housing. Or, as actually happens, most projects are deflated. They're made less than they would be. Fewer units are included because the cost to provide the place for the cars to spend the night, to hang out with each other, doing nothing but being a car, those costs are enough to make developers say, I'm going to stick with what I know is a sure bet. that is detached single-family homes. I'll do a lot of them, and we'll see if we can get there. The challenge is that a single-family home sells for single-family home prices, which are rising. And what we have always seen is that smaller units or units that are in multi-unit dwellings are more flexible price-wise. You can add to them. You can change the way that the layout is. You can turn a duplex into a triplex. You can do many of those things, except that you can't in most of our cities. One of the other barriers are the reluctant banks and financiers who want a pipeline for single detached home loans. That's something easy they can figure out. Or they are willing to put up big money for big projects. But the missing middle housing projects, because of their barriers on the regulatory side, zoning and parking, the consequence is that they are missing for all the wrong reasons. It doesn't have to be this way. Let's ask, what can we do? We can amend the zoning code to allow them. We can say anywhere that you have a residential neighborhood, let's allow a diversity of housing types, up to 3 stories, up to 5 stories, whatever you pick, but allow a diversity of housing types and many people to live in those places. Remove parking requirements. I told my city leaders yesterday night that they get an F when it comes to parking requirements, and that the ideal is to simply say no more parking requirements. You figure it out, to the builders, to the community members, to people as they live on their street. Finally, we need to encourage lending to these types of projects and make it so that way it's possible for this to happen. And as we do that, I am confident that we will unlock so many more opportunities to house people in places that fit their needs and help people to grow old together and enjoy a prosperous and flourishing life. And so I hope you join with me in pushing for the end of our ban on apartments and to bring back that missing middle so that it won't be missing anymore.